So welcome back to the channel, everybody. This is John with SwingFit. So have you ever wondered how good of a golfer do you really need to be in order to move into these new player style irons? I'm talking about the same irons you're seeing a lot of guys on tour put in their bag. And without question, we are seeing a lot of better players that come through our studio that's finally making the switch and getting out of those more traditional blade style irons into something that we call a player's distance iron, such as the new T100s, the Apex Pros, 785s, and maybe even the Tour 921s, just to list a few. But the question remains is, how good of a golfer do you really need to be? And you just might be surprised you're a little better than what you might think. And by the time this video is over, not only are we going to share a real world example where moving a customer into one of these player distance iron was the best fit, but we're also going to help you understand why we did so. So without further ado, let's find out which irons we actually teed up for the customer and which one came out on top. So before we dive too deep into today's topic, I do want to take a quick second to welcome any new viewers to the channel. So if this happens to be your first time and you would like to learn more about the club fitting process, I mean, really gain a better understanding of why club fitters might do certain things during the fit process in order to change the shot outcome, then I promise you, you're in the right place. And all you got to do, consider hitting that subscribe button below and turn on that bell so that way you receive an alert anytime we drop our new content. So now let's give you a little background about the player profile that we're going to be working with this evening, and you just might find some similarities between the two. So the golfer we are working with is in his mid to late 40s, gets out to the golf course about twice a week, doesn't really have time to squeeze any range time in, so the only practice is out on the golf course. And for all intended purposes, he says, I'm a bogey golfer. His current handicap is a 14. He says, I can never link two nines together. I always have a great nine and a bad nine. And he says, it's nothing for me to string 4 or 5 good holes together. And on the rare occasion, I may get lucky and get 1 or 2 birdies in a round. He says, but it doesn't happen very often. And he said the worst part of his game is his irons. He says, you know, there's no disputing, I'm hitting the ball a lot higher than everybody else, and I'm just not hitting it as far. And when we factor in the customer's current swing speed of 88 to 89 miles an hour, I can almost guarantee he's leaving about 10 to 15 yards on the table. But the true question now becomes is, what can we do through the gear to change the shot outcome, and what will the customer have to clean up and do through the technique? Because it's always a two-sided coin, and a great fitter should not only be able to put the right tools in your hands, but he should also be able to help you understand the data, so that way when you leave, you know exactly what are your pain points that you need to focus on. So now that we got that out of the way, let's take a look at the two players distance irons that we're going to be looking at tonight, which is none other than the Callaway Apex Pro iron and the brand new Titleist T100. And although we've had the Apex Pros in the cabinet longer, I can tell you the T100s is chomping on the heels of the Apexes, and both of these irons is not only a great option for our better players, we are also finding it is a great option for our mid handicappers. And that's why we wanted to do this video tonight. So let's kind of talk a little bit about the specs of both of these irons. So first up is the Callaway Apex Pro 21 irons. And at first glance, this thing doesn't look like any other Apex irons that they've ever created. And heck, I'll even go as far to say that it might even be the best looking Apex iron that Callaway has created to date. And if you agree with me on that one, just press that thumbs up. Now, not only did Callaway refine the look and shape of the iron, but they also designed this thing a lot differently than they have in the past as well. And what they did is they actually took a page out of the Metalwood book and they used AI technology to help design and create this iron. And all that allows the company to do is to actually create less prototypes and get to the ending resolution a lot quicker by just using the algorithms within a computer program to determine how and where they should actually move the mass in the head in order to create the best CG characteristics of that design. So now here's a couple other quick specs about the Apex Pro irons. It is available 3 through gap wedge. You can get it in either right or left hand, and they are going to have more of a traditional loft, where the 7 iron is going to clock in at about 33 degrees of loft, which will be about 1 degree stronger than that of the Titleist T100. The other noticeable difference about the Apex irons It does appear to have a little bit more offset than that of the T100 as well. So if you're not a big fan of seeing that offset, then you might want to steer more in the Titleist line than that of the Callaway. But I will say, although it's very negligible, it is noticeable. So now let's talk a little bit about the Titleist T100 irons, and very much the same way at first glimpse, this thing looks super, super clean and beautiful. And there's something about this brushed satin finish that manufacturers use that I think just gives it more of a premium look. And just let me know in the comments, are you a fan of the brushed satin or the chrome finish? Just leave your remarks below. But there is something cool going on in this iron design, and when you look at the back of it, it almost would give you the illusion that that whole bottom piece is just one solid piece of material, and that's not the case. And what Titleist has done is they are using a higher density tungsten material, which really allows Titleist to distribute specific mass in different parts of the head, as pictured in this illustration. And you can see a little bit of a gap between the heel weight and the toe weight. And what Titleist has claimed is this not only allows them to position the CG location up and down, but it also allows them to shift the CG location left and right, depending on how much mass they put in that toe area. Now, in regards to the other details and specs of these clubs, very much like the Apexes, it is available 3-through gap. You can get in them both right and left hand, and it will have a degree weaker loft than that of the Apex irons, and so that means the 7 irons are going to clock in at about 34 degrees. Now, one of the other noticeable differences between these two heads is the sole design, and when you flip these things over, it almost looks like the T100 has a narrower sole than that of the Apex, but it actually isn't. And what you're seeing is the custom grind work that Titleist is using, where Callaway elected to go with more of a traditional grind, so no leading edge or trailing edge relief. And why this is important is, depending on your delivery characteristics, that leading edge and trailing edge relief can potentially be the difference maker to help you get in and out of the turf a little cleaner. So enough chit chat about the player profile and all the gear. Let's actually start taking a look at some shots while we help you understand what was the final build specs that we actually ended up in. And the first series of shots you're going to watch is using the Apex Pro 21 iron with the KBS C-taper light shaft and the stiff flex, that is. And we tried other shafts, other flexes, and this one produced the best launch windows out of everything we tried, and it also offered the best stand pattern. And what's also great about this is this shaft worked just as well in the T100s as it did in the Apexes. So all things being equal, this is going to be a dead even fight because there's really no major differences other than that 1 degree of loft difference that we talked about earlier. So let's take a look at these baseline shots. Now, as these shots start to unfold, we are going to watch both sets of tracers with the Apexes first and the T100 second, and you're going to start to see the customer likes to work the ball a little right to left. That means that his dreaded miss is that blocker push to the right, and he does say that is what he sees with his irons out on the golf course. And you also notice that he's not struggling in the height department whatsoever. And heck, truth be told, other shafts we tried, customer was actually getting it north of 140, and without question, the C-taper lights actually help us get it in an ideal launch window and stuff, but it's still not quite optimum. But really, there's only so much we can do with the gear. And this thing is almost like a dead neck and neck fight because there were some great shots with the Apexes, some great shots with the T100. So let's take a look at the compare tab. Now, I knew the numbers were going to be tight. I just didn't think they was going to be this tight, and this is a dead even race here. I mean, look at these numbers. It's almost like a carbon copy of one another down to the dispersion circles. I mean, it's almost as if, the customer just hit the same club twice. But I can assure you, the first set was the Apex Pro and the second set was the T100s. And as we dial into the numbers line by line, they'll start to separate a little bit, but for the most part, these things are identical. And heck, at this point, customer could just flip a coin and put either one in these bags, and he's going to be okay. So let's dive into the numbers to see if we can understand what's going on with the customer's ball flight and what, if anything, can we do to help steer the customer in a different direction. So working left to right here, ball speed average 113, launch angle 26. Now I can tell you without question, with a 7-iron, ideal launch would be right around say 18 to 20. 21 to 22 is when I really start to get a little concerned. 25, 26, I know something's going on, and I can almost bet that there's something going on with the dynamic loft, and we'll peel that back. But backspin, 5400, not bad, and descent angle, 52. Also understand this, okay? So the ideal landing angle for a 7-iron is about 47 to 49, and that's a really good sweet spot. And anything north of 49, that just gives us an opportunity to maybe dial back the loft to actually help the customer pick up some extra yardage. But in this situation, there's something else going on, so we're not going to make any loft adjustments because I don't want to compound the situation. But when we look at that Apex at averaging out 123 and an average carry of 158, right? Definitely something going on. So let's take a look at the delivery side to see if we can pinpoint what it is. Now, when we take a look at the delivery side, there is so many red flags here, and I'm not going to share anything with you that I didn't already disclose with the customer. He knows exactly what he needs to work on, and if he can clean this up, I can guarantee you he's going to be achieving 170, 175 just like in a blink of an eye, but he's got some homework that he's got to do, and this side of the fence is definitely left best for a swing coach in order to kind of, polish that technique a bit. But let's take a look anyway. So angle of attack, we know we want to hit down on it with our irons. Well, he's hitting up on it as much as a driver. So, I mean, he's picking this thing super, super clean. So if you want to know why he's getting excessive height and launch windows, this would definitely be one of the factors here. And when you look at the dynamic loft, and just keep this in perspective, is ideal dynamic loft with a 7-iron should always be about 7 to 8 minus that of static loft. So as an example, if you got 33 degrees of static loft, I want your dynamic loft to be about 25, 26. And here we're about 10 degrees more than where we want to be. And, we're presenting more dynamic loft than we do have static loft. And that's never a good thing because you're going to see just maybe excessive spins and definitely those higher apexes. So those two factors alone is what's causing the customer to lose distance and energy. So when you look at that efficiency column, 1.28, at the customer's input speed of 88, he should be able to get ball speed numbers north of 120, but that's just because he's striking it in the wrong part of the head. And with a player's distance iron, they do like to be struck about 2 to 3 grooves higher than that of what he was striking it. But even with the low strike points, these clubs performed very, very well, which is why we liked moving him into this style of head, because I think if we moved him into a game improvement head with a lower CG that would encourage or be more beneficial to the lower strike and that shallow delivery, it would only compound the situation, and it really wouldn't encourage him to change his technique. So let's take a look at the T100s. So since this is such a similar song and dance to that of the Apex irons, we're not going to review the delivery side. It is what it is. The customer knows what he needs to work on. So we're going to just focus on the output side because I do have to make a recommendation, but unfortunately, I can't make it just based off of the compare tab or the total averages. I got to look at this line by line so that way I can actually start checking boxes. And if you watch any of my other videos, I'm a big fan that's how we make decisions. The more check boxes I can check, the better I can stand on the recommendation we make. So let's take a look. And when we look at these side by side, you can see the averages are really, really tight, but it's in the details, right? Line by line, shot by shot is where we're going to be able to make this decision. So we got to look at all of the good shots here. So 112.8 versus 112.6, line by line. Apex in the T100, they're almost identical, so no clear winner. I can't give anyone a checkbox. Let's go to the launch angle column, and this is definitely one of the big factors or red flags that we knew we had to address, get launched down, and 26 versus 26.9. And here it just may seem like we're splitting hairs, but definitely the Apex had better launch angles. And just understand this, is that if I can get the gear to get the customer closer to where he needs to be without changing the technique, wouldn't that be the better option? And that's how we make a decision. So the Apex is going to get our very first check mark in the launch angle column. We're going to skip side angle, go to backspin, 54, 52 versus 53, 74. We're talking a couple hundred RPMs of spin, line by line. It's almost identical. I would say the T100 was a little lower spinning, but not by much, so no clear winner. Let's go to descent angle. 51.9 versus 52.5, and you can just see how many shots we had in the 51s versus the 52s with the T100s. Better descent angle. So second green check mark for the Apex. And then that brings us to the peak column here, okay? Yes, offline does come into the equation a little bit, but for the big thing, I'm really trying to help the customer, mitigate that height piece. But when you do look at the offline piece, you can definitely see that he was a little bit better. Deviation was better, 15.1. 22.9 was his average to the right versus 26.7 versus 16. So once again, I didn't want to just gloss over it, but it is a factor. But the launch, descent angle, and apex are those key things that we're really looking at. And no disputing, the apex iron launched and kept the ball a little bit lower. So 123 versus 127. So that's going to get our third and final green check box. And so if you're keeping track and you want to know which head I recommended to the customer, no disputing in this situation, we recommended the Apex Pro with the KBS C-taper light shafts. And the reason why was we checked more boxes, and I truly believe that this club is going to get him closer to where he needs to be, and it's just going to make the dependency on his technique a little less, or it's going to be a little easier for the swing coach because he doesn't have as far to go. So in closing, we truly hope you found value in this information we shared with you today. And once again, full disclosure, just because the Apex Pro iron worked best for this customer situation doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to produce the same results for you. And it's always best to, leave that up to your club fitter so that way you can actually test, try, and verify to see which one fits you best. So guys, if you have any questions or comments, do me a favor, leave them in the remarks below, and don't forget to take a look at one of these videos over here because there's probably a couple golden nuggets that can help you take your game to another level. So until next week, thanks for watching.